Okay, good morning. This is Ree, just doing an audio check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect.
Perfect. All right. Good morning. Welcome to the ADT Redesign Stakeholder Meeting. My name is Liesl Ramos. I am a program administrator at the APD State Office. I oversee the waiting list and all waiver enrollment and the ADT redesign, employment, and transportation. And with me today are other people in the room, and I'll let everybody introduce themselves.
Okay, good morning. My name is Kalima Mohammed, and I coordinate the implementation of the CMS final rule for the iBudget waiver across the state of Florida.
I'm John Bennett from the Office of Performance and Accountability.
I'm Lindsay Riley, and I am in the Supported Employment Unit.
And I'm Elizabeth Keating. I am the WSC State Office Liaison. And as a presenter today, we also have Ree Kennedy-Dizot. And Ree, we'll let you introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. As Liesl said, my name is Ree Kennedy-Dizot. I work for the National Association of State Directors of Developmental Disabilities Services out of Alexandria, Virginia. And I'm here in the capacity as one of the advisors to Florida in your work with the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare on your waiver redesign work.
Thank you, Ree. So we can let Kalima.
Good morning. Again, my name is Kalima Mohammed, and I want to welcome the waiver support coordinators to this long-standing conversation that we've been having regarding the ADT redesign. And it's very integral for you guys to be part of the conversation as sort of the drivers of how things play out, because you are in partnership with the individuals who receive services. And I just want to play a little catch up with you and for those who may not have participated in the discussion previously. Everybody on this call is familiar with the concept of change. And fortunately for me, things change. I couldn't imagine being that same person I was 20, 30, even 40 years ago. And we recognize that change can be difficult. But despite the myths and the misperceptions of working with a disability, one of the major changes that has occurred over the last few years is the recognition of the importance of individuals with developmental disabilities having the same opportunities to have access to competitive integrated employment. Although there were changes prior to the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, this law was a game changer because it laid the groundwork for prohibiting discrimination against people with disabilities in the employment or the workplace. One of the other influences for the change that we're experiencing now is the employment first movement. And Florida is one of 38 states with an official policy that provides a framework for long-term commitment to improving employment outcomes for individuals with disabilities in this state through the implementation of the Employment First Act. And on October 8, 2013, Governor Rick Scott signed an executive order that mandated the creation of an interagency cooperative agreement among specific state agencies and other disability service organizations to ensure that the continuation of a long-term commitment to improving employment outcomes for persons with disability was in place. And APD is one of 8 organizations that sit at this table for the Employment First implementation. The Medicaid Home and Community-Based Final Regulation of 2014, we refer to it as the CMS Final Rule. And the CMS Final Rule requires that providers train individuals and provide opportunities to seek employment and work in a competitive integrated setting and be able to engage in community life to the same degree as individuals not receiving Medicaid home and community-based services. The next area that influenced the change that we're experiencing now is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act. And that was signed into law in July 2014 and focuses on ensuring that students and younger individuals with disabilities can transition better into employment, and it prepares them to succeed in competitive integrated employment. And we realize that individuals with developmental disabilities, they experience different challenges when trying to access employment. And so the WIOA Act, that sort of helps to remove some of those and prepare them to succeed in the workplace. The next area, it's not working. The next area that influences the change that we're experiencing now is the changing expectation of individuals and families. And individuals and families with disabilities want change, and they expect the same opportunities as individuals without disabilities. And they're willing to fight for those opportunities. And so we're seeing a lot of legislation. Some of the legislation I've talked about has been driven by individuals with developmental disabilities and other individuals with disabilities. And lastly, there's a proposed law that's on the books right now. And although we don't expect it to go as far as we want it to, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a major federal minimum wage hike that also phases out Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act. And basically the way this affects individuals with developmental disabilities is this passage marks the first time that any legislation has been put in place to repeal the ability to pay people with disabilities below minimum wage. And so we expect that this may not be passed into law, but the fact that this proposal and this has passed the House is a major change. And so it just sort of helps to lay the groundwork for where we are. And one of the things that we've done in Florida is we have an opportunity, because although we have all these different laws and all these different things that are influencing and dictating the change that we're experiencing happening, we have the ability to sort of design what employment opportunities look like and what the process to get to CMS compliance and compliance with these other requirements are. And so that's why we're so grateful and thankful to have you guys that are on the phone, that are participating in the discussion today, to be part of how we get from where we are to where we need to be. And just want to take a few minutes to talk about some of the things that we've done in the past and the conversations that we've had in the past.
Thank you. We have had 2 stakeholder meetings thus far. One was on May 23rd and the second was on June 25th. And some of you may have participated in those. But for those who are joining us for the first time on this call, we would like to mention some of the challenges that were discussed and that were brought up at our previous 2 meetings. The first is the funding structure does not support the real costs of delivering services. Providers are often covering a percentage of the cost, There's a general consensus that change is needed with the adult day training and supported employment programs, but the rate structure must be addressed in the process. Also, the vocational rehabilitation, APD, and school systems need to be working together to ensure adequate information is shared with individuals and families. For example, there's a lot of misinformation about the impact on Social Security and Medicaid benefits. Identifying employment as a goal for individuals is a big challenge in the system. APD staff and waiver support coordinators can inform individuals and families about the options that are available, such as supported employment services through the waiver and waiting list. Getting employers to be willing to customize positions for the individual is very challenging. This is where work-based learning experiences can help both individuals and employers find the right match for the job. The skills training must be able to prepare individuals for the workforce, example, culinary field, cosmetology, etc. We should consider the role of post-secondary programs as a potential partner, such as credential training. Low expectations within the system, particularly during childhood and adolescence, can have an effect on an individual's opportunities to pursue employment as a goal in the future, which families can learn to accept those low expectations. There are challenges with collaboration between the system during the touch points or handoffs when individuals are transitioning between systems, such as graduating from high school and connecting with VR, etc. Yeah, go back. Yeah, there. Transportation is one of the greatest barriers for individuals with disabilities who want to work in their community. Many communities lack the infrastructure or options to support an individual to and from work. Further, the waiver only funds transportation for individuals who are receiving supported employment services. It does not fund trips for individuals who are just going to and from work. Natural supports within the workplace, such as co-workers who can support the individual with certain job tasks, providing reasonable accommodations, etc., are essential to ensuring the individual's success. Job coaches are expected to fade over time, so it is critical that natural supports are identified early when an individual is receiving supported employment services, both from VR and APD. The system should allow for flexibility and creativity in delivering services. One size does not fit all. ADT does not currently distinguish between work-based training and other non-work, life skills training, traditional known as day habilitation. There needs to be recognition that individuals who are aging or just wish to stay in an ADT would like to receive both supported employment, and ADT is a way to ensure individuals' interests are being considered in planning meaningful day activities. And lastly, it is difficult for many ADT providers to support meaningful day activities out in the community, off-site, without having small staffing ratios. Most ADTs that want to do an off-site model cannot sustain the model daily, so they default to a traditional facility-based model. And we actually have a long list of comments. We just wanted to highlight a few of them. And these will be put on our website for everyone to be able to see them. But next, we wanted to allow Ree to have engaged the waiver support coordinators and self-advocates or family members in a facilitated discussion. So we're going to let you do your presentation now.
Thank you, Liesl. And thank you, everyone, for having me back to join your meetings. It's encouraging to see that you have continued to move forward and not only identify your challenges, but begin to think through how Florida will adjust your system to better meet the needs and the interests of individuals that you provide services to. When we talk about the role of support coordinators in the system, it really is a fine balance between helping the individual identify what they really want to do and what they need from the system, and what our system responsibility is to them. As has been said, our universe is changing, and that's a good thing, and for individuals that we provide supports to. Our system is not a stagnant system. We've learned over time that we really can support individuals with the most challenging issues to have a job like you and I in a competitive, integrated place with an employer in the community, just like anyone else. What we haven't completely managed to do in our system is design our systems in a way that take what we know in knowledge into full practice and implementation. And all these forces that Kalima spoke about and that you guys have been talking about the last few months are really pushing us to that next place of implementation. It's absolutely key. Historically, our system has limited the options that we have offered to individuals to support them in their daily and work lives. In Florida, you have two primary services, your ADT offering and your supported employment offering. And as you are looking at what your challenges are, it's very likely that you will come to creating service options that expand beyond what currently exists. The goal is certainly that we are helping individuals to have a life like you and I, where they have friends, they know their skills, they earn money beyond what they receive from SSI or SSDI income. And they really begin to identify who they really are within themselves and not just be the individuals that we've said they can be based on the services we provide for them. Work changes all of us, and it brings new aspects, new friends, new opportunities, new skill sets into each of our lives. And that is nothing less than people with disabilities deserve to have us support them in doing. We know in the National Core Indicators data, which is a data set that Florida is one of the many states, I think we have 46 or 48 states, forgive me, I don't know the exact number, states across the country that participate in collecting information directly from individuals and their families, though it also collects system information. But we know from that database that over 48% of individuals with the developmental disabilities are asking our systems across the country to help them access competitive integrated employment. Now, we have not yet met that goal, but that's our challenge today. And one of the key issues we wanted to bring support coordinators into the conversation today. As Kalima mentioned, support coordinators are a key factor in helping bring individuals to understand what their choices, what their chances, what the changes are as they help them with their service planning. Case managers have a huge responsibility in what the system brings forward to offer individuals. We have to create opportunities for support coordinators to really approach their work from a person-centered thinking point of view, not just how you have a person-centered plan, but how do we actually learn to listen differently to individuals and families and help translate what they're saying to us into a life of work, adult life of work, fun, play, friends, growth, new knowledge every day. Support coordinators have a responsibility to assure that services are offered in a way that provides good health and safety for individuals, that we assure the individuals know their rights, and not only their rights, but their responsibilities when they make choices around their rights. And I can't say enough about the responsibility and the heavy burden that we recognize support coordinators have in assuring that people have the information they need to make true informed decisions as they choose what kind of services they wish to have in their service plans. We are at a new place in history in understanding how to recognize the dignity of choice and the dignity of taking risk. I have the great opportunity to work with support coordinators across the country. And what I'm going to talk a bit more about in a minute is what we are learning from support coordinators, about the importance of helping individuals and families understand, and providers, I will say, how to help individuals take reasonable, responsible risks in their life. Our systems in the past have been so driven by health and safety and compliance that we've unfortunately often forgotten how important it is for all of us in our lives to take the challenge of risks and take on the responsibility of taking those risks. But as system staff, we have a responsibility to helping individuals know how to manage through risk. And that's a new world for support coordinators, is what I'm learning as I talk with folks across the country. We have gotten into the practice of saying, what do you want? And then if you want this or that, we'll let you have it. And we've often forgotten what is the conversations we have to have around what's important for a person. So when we talk about going into the employment world and helping folks learn to access transportation in a way that is beyond what we've provided in the past, we have to ensure backup plans are in place and that individuals are safe when they're taking risks out there in the world. And we have learned from support coordinators across the country as well that it is hard to have conversations about employment. It's not only do you ask a person, do you want to work, but support coordinators have to recognize where individuals and families are on their life path. We talk a lot about the pathways that we all have in life. And as we recognized earlier on, what we knew when we were 20 is not what we knew and experienced when we were 30 or 40 or 50. And what risks and what choices we've made in life are often based on the experiences we've had in the past. And if we've only had limited experiences, our choices are less informed than they may be if we have more experiences in life. So support coordinators have a new thing to think about as they do the task around person-centered thinking and planning and health and safety and teaching rights and responsibilities. It is to put into play this thinking about how to help people have experiences and know what choices are out there and opportunities, and not be limited by what they know of from their past experiences. So it's really about beginning to have more conversations to expose people for better informed decisions so that we can help them move along this path to employment. As I said, in the NCI National Core Indicators data, we hear that more people want help from us in accessing employment, but often when we get into those deep conversations about it, we get all caught up in, oh my gosh, this person doesn't talk. How are they ever going to work with an employer if they don't use speech, or they are someone who has a very short fuse and they have very explosive episodes because their tolerance for things that happen around them is pretty limited. We do have the knowledge in our field to help individuals with those kind of challenges to us to work. And it behooves us to help them get beyond that, and for support coordinators to know enough that you can help them through that process of informed decision making. So I want to talk a bit about guided conversations. This is something that we have learned is very important for us as a system to go back and help support coordinators know how to have the conversations with individuals and families, so that as they are on their different paths in life or different stages of age in life, that we have different kinds of conversations, and we don't just ask the question, do you want to work? And by the way, if you want to work, you have to go to voc rehabilitation to begin that path towards services to support you in that wish. It's different than that. And those conversations are absolutely critical. The stakes are high. There's lots of opinions out there about how this conversation or that conversation should happen, or how prepared or unprepared someone has to be to go down this path of employment. But it really is about having a guided conversation that helps people through the emotions of all those opinions and high stakes that we're at right now. So I will just give you a little bit of highlight about what I mean about guided conversations for support coordinators to have with individuals and families, and I would suggest with providers as well. One is very simply, and I could go into a 3-day session on guided conversations with support coordinators, and maybe that'll be something that you will in Florida be thinking about as you work on your redesign plan. Having that plan include helping support coordinators through this process of redefining or refining, I should say, not redefining, their role in helping individuals make informed decisions around employment, and not just employment, I must say. We know in this day and age, most people with disabilities, first entrance into the workforce is going to be at a part-time job or an entry-level job. Not always, but most likely. So we have to also remember how to support them through the other times in their lives when they're not working. It's not an either or, and that's important to help individuals and families understand, especially families, because families have expressed loud and clear to us the fear of the myth we often hear out there that if they don't have the ADT program to go to, they're going to end up coming home and sitting on the couch, and I have things to do and I don't know how to support them at home all the time, 5 days a week, 7 days a week, or whatever it is. So thinking about those kind of things is important, and helping identify those fears through conversations is important. So when someone's not working and they're doubtful about whether they even want to consider the world of work, the question to ask is not, do you want to work or not, but to ask them to tell you something about what they like about something they're currently doing, or they're currently doing that they don't like. And then the action step or the agenda item for implementation is to help make the connection to what the person's desires and dreams are into the world of work. No dream is the wrong dream to have. If someone says to you that is an individual that uses a wheelchair and has limited verbal communication or use of their hands, say their dream is to be able to be a pilot in an airplane and fly folks around the earth. That's a dream that deserves to be recognized. That might not be their ideal job, and we need to help them work through how do they get into that world of aviation so they can experience being closer to that dream than just saying, well, you'll never be a pilot. But how do we help them get into the work world of aviation? And there's many, many pathways to do that. So those are the kind of questions you begin to ask or to guide the conversations with when someone is very doubtful about a job. When someone is interested in employment but not yet on a path or hasn't had support to begin to know what it means to go knock on the door of vocational rehabilitation, to tell VR that they're ready to start looking for a job, there's other starting places. And this is something that Florida may want to do as you redesign your ADT services, is put in an element or a new service option, possibly, that helps people think about that pathway and what they can be doing before they get to the place where they've actually identified an interest area and start on that path of actually finding a job. So you begin with the conversation around what worries do you have about working? And it could be everything about, oh my gosh, will I lose my benefits? And people think I can't do that kind of job that I'm interested in because I don't have the skills for it. Begin to have the conversations about what worries you about working. I know you're interested in it, but what happens if the individual lives in a very rural area of Florida? How will they ever get to a job? Or what kind of jobs are even available in rural areas for me to even try? And do we even think about people moving from one area of Florida to another? Who knows? Some states are beginning to think about that. But the action item is to help individuals, and this is a key thing that support coordinators have told us across the country that they need help with, is connecting individuals and their families to other individuals and families who have already experienced working, and help them have conversations together. We know very loud and clear from families and individuals in our system that they most trust each other than they do trusting us case managers or us providers or us state agency staff. Families know to trust other families and navigate the system best when they're connected to families that know how to use the system to help them get what they need. So we need better informed families, and support coordinators have a key role in helping individuals and families connect to other families. And that's another whole day's conversation about how to build that into your redesign project. And maybe we can have that conversation in another meeting. To go down the continued conversations around guided conversations on employment, there's also another place that case managers need to be thinking about and are challenged today to help individuals as they help them with their annual service planning. And that is the recognition that like every one of us that have been working in our adult life, we don't stay in the same job forever. And when you take your first job, it is often just that, a first job, an experience. It's a risk. It's to help us learn what we thought we wanted to do, to know what we really want to do. And sometimes our careers take incredibly different paths. I have to often chuckle, and I will divert the conversation here for a second, about my own son, who was very clearly on a path that he knew for sure when he was coming out of high school that he wanted nothing more than to be a university professor. And so we supported him in that pathway to his career choice and dream in life. But of course, like most of us, when he came out of college, and yes, she went through being an undergrad graduate, a master's degree graduate, and on his pathway to his doctorate degree to be a university professor. But lo and behold, he had a life change with a girlfriend that he thought he was going to marry, and he ended up taking a year off and joining the national service industry, and ended up working for the National Park Service. And from there, he's ended up in a career in the National Park Service, not at all taking or missing taking advantage of all he learned through his college career, but his career path went completely down a different avenue. And that is most likely to happen for individuals with disabilities in the work world. So case support coordinators always have the responsibility to check in with individuals about, do you still like the job you're doing? Are you ready to do something different? Has your employer offered you a promotion? Do you know what it means if you're offered a promotion to deal with increased wages and managing your benefits? So always checking in about what's going to change in your career life and your work world. And the action steps are, is it time to think about additional job training, additional certificate programs? Our community colleges and our workforce systems are exploding right now with new apprenticeships opportunities, certificate programs within expanding industries across this country. There's lots of new opportunities for what is called tiered credentialing, where you learn entry-level skills for a career path, and then you build on that through different expanded certificate programs. Those kinds of programs are beginning to be opened and offered to people with disabilities, and lots of accommodations are being built in. So it behooves us as support coordinators to also think about, through these guided conversations, that once someone's acquired their first job, to remember that's not where they may stay for the rest of their lives. When we really get into deep conversations with individuals that have worked in sheltered workshops for many, many years, and we get beyond the conversations, are you happy here? We hear from them that they wish they would have had the opportunity to try different things. And our system, because of our history of what's been offered in the past, has not helped them think beyond what we've helped them be content with. So now is a time for support coordinators to help people to dream big, move on to different opportunities. And I would suggest within Florida's redesign system, it is very, very important to remember that all the pieces of your system don't stand alone, and support coordinators are not that outside piece. They are a critical key in the redesign and will be a critical influencer in helping you know how to put together your system for the future. And as my slide says, everything impacts something. Each gear of your system creates the whole. And I hope you get the visual. For the clock, there are a million little pieces that make a clock work and will make your system work better for the future in Florida as you redesign it. So as you come together with all the work that you've begun to do this year on your redesign. Each little piece plays a role and needs to be thought about and talked about and put together to make the whole of what you want to happen for your system in Florida. So I'm gonna stop there. Do we want to open up the floor for some conversations before we move into any closing comments?
Yes, I think that's a good idea, Ree, and thanks for the presentation. This is, I mean, basically what we're talking about is doing what we do in a different way. And so, the great thing is that we have support coordinators on the phone. And earlier during the conversation, we did a poll. And let's see, we asked who was actually on the phone. And 36% of the people on the phone at the time were waiver support coordinators. 1% of the callers are self-advocates, 7% are parents or legal representatives, 41% are ADT or other service providers, and 15% were other. So for the 36% out there who are representing waiver support coordinators, this is just the beginning of a conversation that we need to have about what we need to do and what we can do to help you, help the individuals and their families move in the direction that they want to as far as employment opportunities are concerned. And it's going to take everybody on the phone to do that. So we'd like to, I'm going to go to the questions. And there was one from Jose Navarro, suggestion, provide incentives and create partnerships with potential employers, easy guide and simple document for follow-ups. Vocational rehab should have a long list with potential employers. And so one of the partners that we are working with is VR, and I see that Jan Pierce is on, is participating in the conversation. So another comment, Jose Navarro also suggested that there were 46 states participating in NCI. So that confirms the point that you made earlier, Reed. There was a question, can everyone, they were asking who was talking at the time. We addressed that. There was a comment that someone said, what you're describing is in a perfect world. How many times are the individuals going to be asked to get a job until they get tired of the badgering and say, okay? And the thing is there are individuals who receive iBudget waiver services who are clearly telling us that they don't want to work. And for them, the traditional rehabilitation type services for the non-working ADT, that works for them. But there is a large portion of individuals who want to work. And what we need to do is make sure that the opportunity to access competitive integrated employment is available to those individuals. And for individuals who are young and coming out of school, there are laws in place, WIOA, to ensure that they're getting the training, that they're getting what they need to be able to succeed in the workplace. But for individuals who are already in ADTs and have been in ADTs for a while and haven't received that type of training, what we need to do as a state, as providers, families, and other stakeholders and individuals who want to work, is we need to ensure that those individuals get the proper training. Some of the training may be soft skills. It may not be the building of the widget, but it's, learning how to go through an interview and those types of things. And so we want to ensure that people have what they need to be able to actually compete and get out there. Some will be able to do that, some won't. But for those who want it, we want to be able to give them the opportunity. Helping individuals to find jobs is a great goal. And as a team, that's what we're going to do. Can you please repeat the statistics of the participants? And the participants, basically, 1% of the participants are self-advocates, 7% were parents and legal representatives, 36% were waiver support coordinators, 41% were ADT and other service providers, and 15% were others. And that was only 64% of the participants voted at the time that we did that poll. So that just gives us a basic idea. We want this redesign to take into consideration all the possible stakeholders who are affected by the change that has to happen, or who are agents of the change that's going to happen. So that's who participated in the poll earlier. And Ms. Terenzio wanted to know if we could send the PowerPoint. What we could do is we could make that available online after the presentation today. There's a question, what portion of VR's workload or assigned role focuses on the IDD population? And for Jan Pierce, if you're out there and can answer that question, that would be helpful. So the question was, what portion of VR's workload or assigned role focuses on IDD population? And Ms. Terenzio asked, meant to say send out the PowerPoint being used by presenters. Okay. I suggest we educate our community to open opportunities for the people we serve. Society is very closed-minded and do not open work opportunities for them. And Ms. Chow, I think that is a great point that you're making. And part of the process of education is educating ourselves, educating the individuals, educating families, and then in turn, all of us can work as a team and use that partnership to educate the community. And so this is a process it's happening nationally, and we need to get on the train.
If you want to unmute Jan, if you want to.
And Jan, if we can, we've unmuted your line, Jan. So, so that you can, there was another question also. I see that your comment, you don't have the number at your fingertips, but there was another question about VR. Have consumers who are looking for employment with VR this person, I guess, is a support coordinator. She has consumers who've been looking for employment with VR for a long time. Is there a limit on how long a consumer can be assisted, and what causes a consumer to be taking off VR services? So Jan, could you address that question, please? And you've been unmuted. And if you don't have a mic and you can type in a response, then that would be helpful too. There was a question with a number of ADTs developing strategies that align with what this webinar is stating is the desired direction for service change. How can the system support these risks providers are taking? And one of the things, Mr. Lewis, that was a great question. as ADTs begin to move into the direction that is consistent with what we're talking about, where individuals have access to competitive integrated employment opportunities, we want to work with those providers to identify those risks and see what we could do, especially in this redesign process, to minimize those negative risks. And because what we want to do as we redesign our system is account for those types of things. There are things that even in the best built plan, there are going to be risks that are unintended. And we want to at least be able to see those risks and try and prevent them if possible, but account for them if they are not if we can't prevent them fully. Does anyone else of the staff want to have any feedback into the questions that I've read so far? Yes, the staff. The 12 staff who.
Nope.
And unmute them.
Unmute them all. Unmute them.
So for the staff, we are unmuting you, and we'd like your input to the questions and the conversation we've had so far. Can you hit the all, that one?
They just now have to do it.
Oh, okay. So, and you can unmute your line to speak. Can you scroll up? Denise.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, I asked a question about the consumer with the VR.
Okay, and what's your name?
My name is Shirley.
Okay.
I'm in Daytona office in area 12.
Okay, and what question was that specifically? I'm sorry.
Okay, I have a consumer that had been looking for a job for about a year and she really wants a job. But after a year, I think she said she got a letter saying that because her parents didn't show up or something for a meeting, twice they didn't show up for a meeting and she got taken off the program. I'm explaining through her understanding, okay? I didn't see the letter.
Okay, and so the response that we got from Jan Pierce was, wait, Jan responded, she's having problems with her mic. VR is committed to working with our mutual customers. VR does not have a specific time limit for most of our services. VR will continue to work with individuals who are interested in services. Supported employment has a 24-month service limit, but it could be extended if needed. And so, excuse me, for that individual that experienced that, maybe it would be helpful if, and you're a waiver support coordinator or APD staff.
So who can I contact?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out what your role is. Are you a support coordinator?
Support coordinator.
Okay, so what you could do is reach out to maybe the employment liaison in your region, and they have a very close relationship with VR. And so together, the three of you guys can work to try and ensure this individual get their needs met.
Okay, I didn't hear who the name, I understand you said to get in contact with liaison, but did you say the name of the liaison?
What region are you in?
Area 12, or I guess 4 maybe for that, but I'm from area 12, or yeah, area 12.
Okay.
That's
Um,
gonna be,
Hold on, the area's mixed up. I worked out of Daytona.
okay.
You can call the Northeast office and I'm sure they can locate the supported employment liaison for you.
Okay,
that's
that,
gonna be Helen Renee Cook. Helen
Oh.
Cook.
And so you can reach out to Ms. Cook and in the regional office and present the information that you presented on the call today. And if you have difficulty after doing that, then you can reach out to Ms. Liesl Ramos here in the state office, and we can facilitate that process for you. But first, work closely with Ms. Cook, and then it would be nice to also let us know that worked and how you were able to maneuver it. Because in this process of redesigning how we do things, best practice things will come out. And so if things worked well once you connected with all of the subject matter experts in this area, it would be helpful because we can create that path or explain that path to other regions and other individuals who've had similar challenges that you just explained. Okay, any other question? Let's go up, there's something I see that Belinda Hoyt. There's a question from Ms. Hoyt. Can guidelines for ADT programs be instilled to increase exploratory opportunities, including dream boards, local career fields, community speakers, volunteer opportunities, and mock job interviews? And Ms. Hoyt, all of those things that you're talking about are consistent with best practice. And it would be great if you could do that, and if we could identify other ADT programs who have done that, we could put you in contact with those providers so that you guys can talk about the best way that you could probably do that at your ADT. There's another comment. This entire discussion assumes there's funding available to support these efforts. As it is, individuals' budgets are so low that most people can't afford even the same services they may have received in the past. Also, historically, payment for placement and employment is based on the benchmarks of how long a person stays. Is that changing? And Ms. Good, this is a good question, and one of the elephants in the room that has always been part of our conversation is the idea of pay increases. And we have what money we have, and the idea of increasing the cost of a service and those things, that takes time. And one of the things that happened in our May 23rd presentation that started all of this is we looked at states that had some of the higher rates and they performed the worst. And so although we do recognize that money can be used as an incentive, that is going to require lots of haranguing, including legislative changes. And as a person other than the state, you may be in a position to talk to your legislators about those types of changes that need to happen to make it possible for us to be able to increase the cost. But one of the things that has come up several times in the conversation is the fact that this appears to be an unfunded mandate. And when we look at the nature of these waiver services, the requirement, like when you look in the handbook, it talks about employment opportunities. When you look at the waiver, it talks about people getting access to employment. Because we have not monitored to this specifically, then there's not a lot of this happening. And the beginning of this conversation, we talked about all the influences that are changing, that have changed to make us move in this direction. So despite the fact that it was written in the ADT in the handbook, the iBudget handbook, to say that individuals need to get access and learn skills for employment, that's just something that we have not consistently done in Florida. And instead, what we've done is when we identify individuals who want to work, we have referred them to VR and felt as if our job was done. And we're here to say that that is part of the process, but there are a lot of things that need to be done. So funding is always something in the back of our minds, but that, you know, the expectation with this service is that individuals will learn the skills they need to be able to be integrated into their communities. And if employment is one of the goals that they say they want, then that's something that providers should be trained in how to help that individual gain access to that other service or that other aspect of community living. So the next question, the outcomes required by federal VR dollars are far too stringent for less independent individuals. So where does the funding come from for entry-level skills, certificate programs mentioned? And one of the things that there have been other people on other stakeholder calls that talked about grants that are out there and other funding, not just focusing specifically on waiver funding, because the waiver funding is limited. And despite the waiver funding being limited, every year we increase, you know, almost exponentially what we're paying in ADT, yet the employment outcomes have not improved. The employment outcomes based on the latest numbers have declined, and we're still paying more money every year for this service. So we have to figure out, and we need your help to help us figure out what we need to do different so that we start meeting the expectations that CMS and the feds, who pay a sizable portion called the FFP, we need to figure out what we need to do. And we're working in partnership with providers, with individuals receiving services with VR to move in this direction. And you're right, some of the requirements may be too stringent, especially for individuals who are in ADTs. And it's easier for younger people where the system has sort of converged to meet their needs as they are younger, and things are set up better for the younger people. But VR is saying that they can help fund training and certificate programs for individual VR customers. So that's something that, you know, like we had said earlier, to the individual who had concerns about the individual who had been dropped from VR, maybe there's a conversation that needs to be had with the support coordinator, the employment liaisons in the APD regional office, and the VR representative to identify what that funding looks like and how to best access it for the people who want and need that training. So cost does increase when more demands are placed. And that's a good point, Ms. Coleman. So we just need to figure out how to make these changes with the monies that we have. And I'm not saying that that's easy. That is a challenge, and we recognize that. There's a question, is there a set or strategic date for the redesign to be launched?
We'll talk about that in the next steps.
And that's something that we'll discuss in next steps. So, Ms. Bryan, that's a good question. And we are, I do appreciate all of the questions that have been coming in, and I want to read as many of them as I can. We have a few more. Maybe now that there's a low unemployment rate, it will open employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And I think it's a good idea that we strike while the iron is hot, and we put ourselves and the individuals that we serve in the best possible position to benefit from the employment market right now. And that's what this conversation is about, being ready and being able to move. So the population is aging, and the ADT is a way to keep them engaged in life, socially involved. And that is one thing that the ADT can do. And for individuals who want to work, the ADT can and should be able to help those individuals meet their needs, because these are person-centered services. And so if you have an ADT with 100 people and only 20 of them want to work, that ADT should be able to help those 20 individuals move in the direction that they need to be able to be employed. When students begin the transition stage and are already involved in Victory program or Publix program, APD should look into extending those programs so those students that are already working and interning can continue once they graduate. That's a great idea. And so that's a conversation that providers and families and individuals could have with the Victory program and the Publix program and other community programs that are in place to help individuals work. We're talking about ADT, but your emphasis has been on supported employment. Can you explain how the ADT is expected to provide or transition these students beyond what they are already doing? And one of the things that we need to talk about is because in ADT, oftentimes we see ADT providers who are doing a great job in helping individuals access vocational types of activities and those things. But the way ADT is written right now, it's written as a day habilitation service. So Ms. Anderson, although the emphasis has been on individuals accessing employment, we know that there are some ADTs who where individuals get paid for these vocational activities, and that's something that's more consistent with supported employment. And we're going to have more conversations with ACA, the Medicaid administering agency, and with ADT providers to help us to, when they have those situations, we're going to work with ADTs and ACA to help us move into that direction so that we're not talking to ADT providers about supported employment and vocational types of things. And one of the things that Ree mentioned earlier is developing a service that more closely aligns to what it is that this conversation is about. It's more of a pre-vocational service, so that individuals can get those skills that they need to be successful in in employment settings. So the lack of jobs in people with disabilities is not because ADT are failing and funds are not properly being used. It's because APD forces the consumers to go through phase one with VR. And one of the things that happens is individuals have to use other resources if they're available, because Medicaid is a payer of last resort. And so if monies are available for them to access phase one of supported employment through VR, then they are required to use that other funding, because we have to be mindful that Medicaid is a payer of last resort, and Medicaid cannot cover services that are available through some other funding source. So we have to exhaust that. But because we're talking about individuals who may need more and may not be eligible for VR, may not be ready for VR, then there are requirements that we're asking the ADTs to look into to provide that training to get them to the door so that they could be ready for VR at some point. I have time to read a couple more questions, and then we're going to move on and talk about the next steps. So our ADT offers the I Can Work module, which gears them for employability. It is our hope that the community will be factored in so our offers can become notoriety. So Ms. Bryant, I think that is a good opportunity to talk about things that may work, things that are working, or are the things that you are doing, because we talked earlier about some of the challenges, but there are a lot of ADTs, and I've traveled around the state and talked to a lot of ADT providers. There are a lot of providers that are out there, and some of you may be represented on this call today, who are doing outstanding things and have come up with some very creative ways to move people in the direction consistent with what these federal laws are. So we want to hear from you, and if we can partner with you, with our employment liaisons and VR and community providers and employers out in the local areas where you are, that makes it easier, because it looks like you're already starting to work. And so maybe there's something that you're doing that we can share with other providers. So it would probably be a good idea to have a call where we're talking about just what works. And just like today, we focused on the conversation with the waiver support coordinators. That was to bring them into the conversation, because they're going to work with the individuals to drive what happens with this. But we need to have a conversation with the ADT providers and the supported employment providers who are doing some of these things that we're talking about, because there are some providers who really want to do this and want to make the positive change, just don't know how. So for those of you out there who are making a difference, or who have figured out how to get some grant funding, how to find other funding other than waiver funding, we want to hear from you to see what it is that's working, what things that you've tried and thought were going to work but didn't, and how you rebounded and then were able to succeed in spite of those early challenges in your process. So our ADT has monthly meetings and asks what the individuals want to do. We educate and provide the experience, the choices, learning more about animals and those kinds of things. And that's great, Ms. Cook. It sounds like you're doing some person-centered services in your ADT, and I applaud you for that. And so that takes us, and thank you again for everybody who had comments. Hopefully you found this very helpful. We want to now talk about next steps, and I am turning it back over to Ms. Liesl Ramos.
Thank you. As you can imagine, this has been very, very good conversation, but we need to now think about what's going to happen next. We're working on a plan to implement an ADT redesign, and in that plan, we're looking at specific goals and specific actionable items that we can complete. Some of them require us to coordinate and collaborate with internal and external stakeholders, such as the Agency for Healthcare Administration, VR and DOE, the Department of Economic Opportunity, the DD Council, and others. We also, as I mentioned, will continue collaborating with our stakeholders, including ADT, supported employment providers, waiver support coordinators, self-advocates, their parents, and legal representatives. And we'll continue collecting data. Data is very necessary as we move forward, just to make sure that all the necessary data elements are captured, how many people are wanting to get jobs, and how do we communicate that information with our partners such as VR, and therefore we are working with VR on implementing a data sharing interagency agreement so they can know from the APD side how many people have indicated an interest in obtaining a job and need VR services, and then on the flip side of that, how many people have completed the VR program and are ready to come to phase 2 and continue with supported employment. Also need to work with our possible employers around the state, engaging them and making sure that they're on board with employing individuals with developmental disabilities, and working with the Agency for Healthcare Administration to align the iBudget waiver and our handbook with CMS rules and requirements. We certainly hope that this has been a good conversation and a meaningful meeting today for everyone. We appreciate everyone's involvement. Thank you, Reed, for being on the call today and helping us look at the role of the waiver support coordinator. I'm gonna turn it back to Kalima.
And one of the things that I want to say, I do want to thank the waiver support coordinators for participating in this conversation and hopefully committing to continue to participate. And one of the things that, no good deed goes unpunished, I want to challenge you to invite your clients and their family members or legal representatives, because on today's call, one of the things that was very important, it was critical to me in these stakeholder outreach meetings, is to ensure that the people who are most affected by the services are at the table and helping us with providing input into what we should do. And so, for example, on today's call, only 1% of those participating were self-advocates, and only 7% were parents or legal representatives, but we have 36% WSC participation. And I'm glad that you guys are here, but if everybody can invite at least 1 or 2 self-advocates for the next call, then we can have more meaningful conversation, because we can put all of our heads together and come up with something that's real shiny and nice to address the needs of the providers, of the waiver support coordinators, and of those who represented the other, which was about 15%. But the individuals who have to, maneuver the system that we put in place may have challenges that were unforeseen. So if we can all invite the family members and the individuals who are affected by these services and who want work or who don't want work, and have them be part of the conversation, that would be very meaningful. So as the slide reflects, our next tentative meeting is scheduled for May 5th, and that's from September 5th. I don't know where I got May from. That's my morning brain. That's, so September 5th, and that's going to be from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., and that's Eastern time. So what we're going to do is we're going to post the information in the FAR. We're also going to put information on the APD website, and we're going to post information on the Facebook page for APD. And the information that's going to be posted on the APD website in the FAR and in Outlook, in Facebook, is going to have the link for the registration for the next call. So we look forward to that, and we will post the information for the slides probably on Outlook. Will we put that on the
website,
internet?
yeah.
Okay, so we'll have that information available on the website. And again, thank you. And this The success of this redesign depends on all of you guys and us. So I thank you again.